The year was 1595, and deep within the Vatican's labyrinthine archives, a lone scholar's trembling hands brushed dust from a crumbling manuscript. The flicker of his candle illuminated words that would send shivers through the Holy See. In the final persecution, Rome shall be destroyed. The faded ink bore the name Malachy of Armagh, 12th century Irish monk whose prophecies had lain buried for centuries, now resurrected to haunt the corridors of power. How did this obscure mystic, born into the mist-shrouded hills of medieval Ireland, ascend from forgotten friar to a saint whose visions still stalk the church like a ghost? The answer lies in a paradox. Malachy's canonization in 1190 was celebrated as a triumph of faith, yet his prophecies were later deemed so dangerous that cardinals allegedly hid them, fearing they might unravel divine authority. Imagine the scene. Whispers curling through conclaves, red-robed princes debating whether to burn the texts or wield them as tools of control. The prophecies' 112 cryptic Latin mottos predicting every pope until the end of time were no mere devotional poetry. They were political dynamite, threading papal history with phrases like the Last Judgment and Peter the Roman, a shadowy final pontiff said to reign amid Armageddon. Scholars still dissect whether Malachy's visions were divine or diabolical, a saint's clairvoyance, or a masterful medieval forgery. Yet the chilling truth remains. His rise to sainthood itself reads like a prophecy fulfilled. The Church, eager to canonize a reformer who revived monasteries and tamed corrupt clergy, turned a blind eye to his darker mysticism until his words resurfaced centuries later, sharper than any blade. What secrets did those Vatican walls swallow? Diaries hint at frantic debates. One bishop called the prophecies a mirror held too close to God's design, while others dismissed them as heretical fantasy. But like a virus, Malachy's legacy spread from hushed confessionals to apocalyptic cults, from Reformation-era panic to modern doomscrollers parsing his mottos for signs of AI-driven doom. Today, as pilgrims kneel before his relics in Belfast, one question lingers like incense smoke. Did the saint foresee the future, or did the future bend itself to fit his myth? The archives, ever silent, guard their secrets in the dark. Asterisk, the winds howling across 12th century Ireland carried more than salt and storm. They bore whispers of a man straddling the veil between heaven and earth. Malachy Ó Morgair, born into the gilded violence of Ulster's warrior nobility, once reveled in the clash of swords and the heat of mead halls. His hands, later famed for blessings, were first calloused by the hilt of a blade. But destiny, as it often does, arrived as a knife in the dark. On a night thick with peat smoke, the young chieftain's son claimed to hear a voice, not the rasp of a druid's chant, but a sound like frozen honey, luminous and terrible, commanding him to build God's kingdom where wolves now reign. Historians dismiss it as epilepsy or guilt-induced hallucination, yet what followed defied reason. Malachy abandoned his birthright, trading armor for sackcloth, and marched into the monastic wilds of Armagh. There, amidst Ireland's decaying churches, rotted by Viking raids and corrupt priests, he began his crusade. With fists as unyielding as his faith, he expelled drunkards from holy orders, rebuilt abbeys stone by stone, and whispered of visions that chilled even his allies. Clerics who'd grown fat on bribes spat curses at this upstart reformer, branding him a madman and false prophet. But the peasants knew better. When famine blackened the fields, they flocked to his cloak, swearing he multiplied loaves with a touch. When storms devoured fishing boats, they prayed to his name and swore the waves stilled. Yet what truly cemented his legend was the plague of shadows in 1134. As pestilence slithered through villages, turning flesh to mottled parchment, Malachy strode into the epicenter of death. Survivors' accounts, etched in monastery ledgers, tell of him pressing his forehead to the festering sores of children, his prayers a golden thread, pulling souls back from the abyss. Skeptics sneered. Charlatan! They accused him of using mercury salves or Arab medicine, secrets gleaned from pilgrims. But how to explain the light? Dozens swore his body glowed as he healed, a radiance that left burns on his robe-scorch marks later venerated as relics. Even his enemies faltered. When Bishop Sellecaer, his fiercest critic, lay choking on his own blood, Malachy appeared, unbidden at his bedside. The chronicles claim the dying man's final words were, "I see them too, the angels, forgive me." Yet for all his miracles, Malachy's true power lay in the fractures he exposed. His prophecies reams of Latin, verses predicting popes and plagues, were not mere piety. They were grenades lobbed at the Church's complacency. When he wrote of a future pontiff draped in the blood of saints, was this divine foresight or a coded attack on Rome's decadence? Modern psychologists suggest his visions were trauma-transmuted, the boy who'd seen Viking axes butcher. Monks now hallucinated Armageddon. But try telling that to the 13th century nun who swore she saw Malachy's ghost pacing St. Peter's, murmuring warnings to sleeping cardinals, or to the 21st century conspiracy theorists who dissect his mottos for clues about AI, apocalypses, and climate collapse. The greater truth may lie in the duality of his legacy, a man canonized for reviving the Church, yet whose very name became a byword for heresy. In his lifetime, Malachy walked a razor's edge, hailed as a savior by the desperate, denounced as a demagogue by the powerful. When he died in 1148, en route to Rome, even death refused to still his contradictions. His corpse, carried home by monks, allegedly bled fresh blood when it passed territories of his foes. Today, scholars pore over his life written by the sainted Bernard of Clairvaux and wonder how much was scrubbed clean. Bernard's hagiography drips with miracles but omits the darker prophecies, the ones that would later surface in the Vatican's locked drawers. Was this a cover-up or proof that Malachy's mysticism defied even his biographer's quill? Beneath the layers of myth and dogma, a fragile human emerges, a warrior monk haunted by celestial voices, forging holiness through sheer force of will. His story asks us, dares us to decide, were his visions a bridge to the divine, or the screams of a mind shattered by a world teetering on the edge of darkness? The answer, like Malachy himself, remains cloaked in storm and shadow. Asterisk. The path to canonization is seldom a straight line. It is a web spun from miracles, politics, and the quiet violence of historical amnesia. When Malachy's corpse was laid to rest in 1148, his bones barely cold before the hagiographies began, the Vatican faced a dilemma: how to sanctify a man whose very essence defied the Church's tidy categories of holiness. To canonize a prophet, a visionary who claimed direct communion with God, was to risk appending the hierarchy that separated clergy from mystic, doctrine from revelation. Yet by 1190, barely 4 decades after his death, Malachy was fast-tracked to sainthood, his canonization ratified with unseemly haste. Historians still pick at the scars of that decision. What deal was struck in those smoke-filled chambers where bishops plotted over wine-stained parchments? The official criteria: heroic virtue, 2 verified miracles, enduring influence, were met with theatrical precision. Witnesses swore blind to his posthumous interventions, a drowned boy revived at his tomb, a barren queen impregnated after clutching his relics. But behind closed doors, whispers slithered like serpents. "Do we anoint a saint?" one cardinal allegedly hissed, "or a seer who could damn us all?" The answer, it seemed, lay in a Faustian bargain. Malachy's reforms rebuilding monasteries, purging drunken priests, made him a useful icon for a church desperate to rebrand itself after centuries of rot. His prophecies, however, were locked away, treated not as divine insight but as radioactive ore. That is, until 1572, when Pope Pius V, a gaunt Dominican zealot, marched into the Battle of Lepanto clutching a crucifix, his galleys outnumbered by Ottoman hordes. Against all odds, he triumphed and the church erupted. In a frenzy of retroactive myth-making, scholars dusted off Malachy's list of papal mottos and pointed, trembling, to entry number 94, Ignis Ardens, burning fire. Pius, the hammer of heretics, who lit pyres for witches and Jews, fit the epithet like a glove. Suddenly, the dead saint's words were not heresy but proof a celestial. Yelp review confirming the Vatican's divine mandate, yet the deeper truth is far murkier. Malachy's prophecies, written in ambiguous Latin, were less crystal ball than Rorschach test. Pillar of fire could lionize a crusader pope or damn a tyrant. Moonlight in the sky might herald peace or portend. Eclipse, the church, ever pragmatic, weaponized this ambiguity. When skeptics noted that the prophecies only gained attention after the popes they supposedly described had died, apologists countered with circular logic. The saint's modesty hid his gifts. Even the miracles underpinning his sainthood. Reeked of stagecraft, the drowned boy? A fisherman's son found breathing after 3 days, a tale suspiciously echoing Lazarus. The queen's pregnancy? She'd taken a Sicilian lover weeks before her pilgrimage, but to dismiss Malachy's canonization as mere propaganda is to miss the forest for the ghosts. His rapid sainthood wasn't just expedient, it was terrifying. The same bishops who voted aye trembled at his uncanny accuracy. In private diaries, one confessor wrote of nightmares where Malachy's corpse sat up in its crypt, reciting the names of future antipopes. Another burned letters warning that the prophecies were a key to doors best left unopened. Modern scholars dissecting the 12th century canonization records find eerie lacunae, pages torn out, witnesses' names redacted, a trail of inkblots where Malachy's own voice should be. Was the church not just honoring him, but containing him, turning a rebellious mystic into a neutered icon, his fangs pulled by liturgy? The ultimate irony arrived in 1590, when Cardinal Girolamo Simoncelli, racing to become pope, paid thugs to ransack libraries for Malachy's manuscripts. His motto, he believed, was "From the heart of the earth," a sure sign of victory. He lost. The winner, Urban VII, reigned just 12 days before dying of malaria. Malachy's prophecy for Urban? Lilium et rosa, lily and rose, a phrase still debated by cranks and cloistered nuns. This, perhaps, is the saint's final joke, that his divine words proved as chaotic and capricious as history itself. The church, having baked him into its sanctified pantheon, now couldn't excise him without unraveling its own legitimacy. So his ghost lingers in the fevered conspiracies of conclaves, in the way every modern pope is squinted at through the prism of his mottos. Francis, the Jesuit reformer, bears the Last Judgment. Coincidence, or a wink from the grave? Malachy's sainthood, then, is a hall of mirrors. To walk its corridors is to confront the Church's oldest magic trick, the transmutation of doubt into dogma, of rebellion into right. The prophecies, whether forged or fated, are now relics in their own right, tools to terrify and enthrall, proof that even saints can be puppeteered from beyond the veil. And as the Vatican's archivists well know, some doors, once opened, can never fully be shut, asterisk in the winter of 1590. As Rome shivered under a pall of apocalyptic dread, a Benedictine monk named Alfonso Ceccarelli stumbled upon a moldering chest in the Vatican's Archivum Secretum. Inside lay a manuscript that would ignite 5 centuries of obsession, Malachy's prophecies exhumed from oblivion. The timing was diabolical. Europe was aflame-plagued carts rattling through London, witch trials devouring Germany, and the Church itself fractured by Reformation. Into this chaos, Malachy's ghost returned, his cryptic mottos spreading like a psychic virus. Petrus Romanus, the final pope, who will feed the flock amid many tribulations, became a rallying cry for doomsday cults and a weapon for conspiracy theorists. The Vatican, caught between denial and delight, watched as its long dead saint was resurrected as both savior and saboteur. Critics snarled that the prophecies were forgeries, a divine PR campaign to legitimize papal elections. After all, how convenient that the list resurfaced just as the Borgias' corruption threatened to topple the Holy See, yet for every skeptic shouting, "Hoax!" there were 10 believers falling to their knees. A French nun claimed Malachy's spectre guided her through visions of a black sun rising over St. Peter's. A Venetian printer, driven mad by transcribing the mottos, drowned himself in the Grand Canal, screaming, "He knew! He knew!" The prophecy's power lay not in their precision but in their poetry. Malachy's phrases, lumen in caelo, light in the sky, religio depopulata, religion laid waste, were Rorschach blots for every crisis. When Napoleon's cannons battered the Vatican in 1798, zealots declared it the fulfillment of crux de cruce, cross from a cross. When John Paul II, the Pilgrim Pope, survived an assassin's bullet in 1981, mysticists whispered that his motto, De labor solis, from the labor of the sun, hinted at a miraculous eclipse. The Church, ever the reluctant puppeteer, alternately canonized and censored Malachy's legacy. Popes quoted him in encyclicals while cardinals burned unauthorized copies of his prophecies. By the 20th century, he became a paradox, a Vatican-endorsed saint invoked by those plotting its downfall. Fast forward to the 21st century, where Malachy's ghost haunts not cathedrals, but chat rooms. Online conspiracists splice his mottos. With QAnon gibberish, while historians duel in tea talks, was he a saint or a medieval Nostradamus? Asks Dr. Eleanor Marchetti of Cambridge, her tone dripping with academic venom. Nostradamus dealt in vague quatrains Malachy's prophecies. Are surgical strikes on our psyche? Yet for all the noise, it's the silent believers who startle. In a Mumbai slum, a grandmother lights a candle to Malachy each monsoon, praying his spirit will hold back the floods. In São Paulo, a transgender nun leads a clandestine congregation, citing his end-times prophecies as proof that God's kingdom belongs to the outcasts. And in 2020, as COVID wards overflowed, a nurse in Madrid swore she felt Malachy's hand on her shoulder during the darkest shift, a cold warmth. She called it, like moonlight made flesh. What fuels this devotion? Perhaps it's the human need to see patterns in chaos, to believe that a 900-year-old monk, bones dust in some Irish crypt, holds the cipher to our shared doom. Or perhaps it's the Church's own Faustian bargain. By sanctifying Malachy, they eternalized his mystery. Today, his prophecies are less about predicting popes than mirroring our terror's climate collapse. AI rebellion, the hollowing of faith. When Pope Francis dubbed the Last Judgment in Malachy's list, open synods on Amazonian deforestation or AI ethics, the symbiosis is irresistible. Is the saint guiding the Church, or is the Church puppeteering the saint? The answer may lie in a forgotten footnote. In 1631, as Galileo faced the Inquisition, a censor's note scrawled in the margin of Malachy's manuscript asked, "Did God speak to him, or did he speak to God?" The query was hastily blotted out, but its stain remains. Malachy's true. Prophecy was never about popes or plagues, it was about us. Our hunger for meaning in the void, our willingness to kneel before shadows. As the doomsday clock ticks toward midnight, his legend thrives, not in spite of the ambiguity, but because of it. The Vatican, tight-lipped, still guards the original manuscript. Yet late at night, archivists swear the pages rustle on their own, as if stirred by a breath from the 12th century or the 21st. Beneath the vaulted silence of the Vatican's secret archives, where time itself seems to curdle, Malachy's final prophecy waits, a single line etched in iron gall ink. In the final persecution, the Roman Church will be destroyed, and the judge will come to pass sentence. The words, brittle as a saint's fingernail, with a question that has gnawed at the Church for centuries. Did this Irish monk, dead 800 years, truly pierce the veil of time, or did Rome stitch his legacy into a tapestry of divine theater? Consider the evidence like a detective circling a corpse. Malachy's 112 papal mottos, uncannily precise yet maddeningly vague, mirror history's ebb and flow until they don't. Pillar of fire, prophesied Pius V's victory at Lepanto, but was that divine foresight or post hoc myth-making by a church desperate to crown itself God's chosen? Historians note grim parallels. The Borgias, whose reign of poison and incest went unmentioned by Malachy, or Pius XII, the silent pope of the Holocaust, whose motto, Pastor Angelicus, angelic shepherd, rings hollow against unmarked graves, yet for every misfire there's a hit that chills. John Paul I, dead after 33 days in 1978, matching Malachy's De Medietate Luna, from the half moon, a phrase some tie to lunar cycles, others to the fleeting glow of a doomed papacy. Coincidence? Or the smirk of a ghost? The answer, perhaps, lies not in parchment but in power. The Church, that ancient alchemist, has always spun mysticism into control. Joan of Arc's visions were heresy until they fueled French nationalism. Malachy's prophecies were suppressed until they could sanctify papal primacy. Even now, as conspiracy theorists dissect Pope Francis's motto, "The Last Judgment," linking it to climate collapse or AI revolt, the Vatican neither confirms nor denies. It simply waits like a spider in the shadow of the cross. Yet what happens when the prophecy outgrows the prophet? Across online forums, Petrus Romanus truthers swap manifestos claiming the final pope walks among us, an Argentine reformer, a Nigerian radical, a sentient algorithm. The whispers crescendo, blurring faith and fanaticism, as if Malachy's quill now writes in code across our collective subconscious. But linger on that final line. The judge will come to pass sentence. Is this God's wrath or humanity's? In an age of melting ice caps and nuclear brinksmanship, the prophecy mutates, a mirror reflecting our own eschatological panic. We crave Malachy to be real, for his visions to be more than medieval fabulism, because certainty even of doom soothes the chaos. Yet, if he was a fraud, the greater horror emerges, that we've built our dread on a lie, that the judge is no one but ourselves. Night falls on St. Peter's Basilica. Imagine the echoes, a Gregorian chant fading into the shuffle of tourist feet, the click of an archivist's lamp switching off. Somewhere, a page trembles in a locked drawer. The melody dissolves, but the question remains, coiled like smoke in the air. Did we discover the prophecy, or did the prophecy discover us? The answer, like Malachy's bones, is buried too deep to exhume. All that's left is the echo, the shudder, the silent amen.